Hey Steelers Nation, Joe Rocky coming back at you with another episode of the Pittsburgh Steelers Syndicate. Today's episode, we're going to cover the number 3 thing that the Pittsburgh Steelers need to improve upon from last year to this year to win the Super Bowl. And that is sacking the quarterback. The Pittsburgh Steelers last year were 14th in sacking the quarterback based upon the amount of times that he dropped back. 14th in the percentage game. So, meaning half of the league was more likely to sack you than the Pittsburgh Steelers. And we look at the reasons why. The glaring one is, well, TJ didn't play basically the first half of the year, and then he wasn't really healthy, at least at his level, for the remainder of the year. That's true. But we did see the advent of Highsmith. Highsmith put up a ton of sacks. The problem was, aside from Highsmith and Cam, there was nothing else. And this isn't like TJ going and breaking the sack record. The Steelers, to be effective as a pass rush overall, needed to broaden the angles of attack. Long story short, get better missiles on the field to shoot down the enemy. And that's exactly what they did this offseason. When we look at the arsenal of interior defensive linemen who are doing the pass rush, Cam Hayward is already a beast and a stud, still here. Leal, another year better, should be improving, plus, more importantly, going to just be playing the one position. He'll be covering either the B or the C gap, and that is it. Last year, when Watt went out, they were exploring Leal being off-ball linebacker, trying to come from different spots, and it just didn't work for the guy. Also, rookies, that's a lot to put on a rookie's plate. I do strongly believe in the second go-around, as Tomlin says, for vast improvement. And I think Leal might be your unsung, under-the-radar defensive stud entering this season. We look at Alalu. Last year, he was fine at run stopping. He hasn't really had a pass rush for the last 3 years. And what do? They replaced him with Benton. Again, rookies you can't really expect a ton out of. But at Wisconsin, he was basically unblockable. And more importantly, especially with defensive linemen, Benton has a motor that does not stop at all. And for a second-round draft pick, to get someone of his size and caliber is amazing. There's a lot of his film that looks like he's just a more interior version of Cam. He has that same drive, that same blow-throughness. Now, granted, Benton is in college, so you don't know if it's going to translate to the pros, but Benton got off blocks really well. And if there is the transfer, which there should be, there's a total belief in my mind that Benton is the true to-it replacement that we've never really done. And if we get that to be the case, you can have amazing, amazing pass rush. Now, the other thing that the Steelers very rarely did last year was blitz. Now, the definition of a blitz by all metrics is sending 5 guys or more. And the reason the Steelers didn't do that was twofold. One of which was going to yesterday's episode. They weren't really able to cover incredibly well with just 6 guys. So they needed to have the 7th one out there, which means you lost a pass rusher. That's just math of the sport. So, we look at what they did here on the outside. They have the ability of putting Peterson in the slot, Wallace and Porter on the outsides, and playing much tighter coverage. And when I say tighter, I mean closer to the line of scrimmage. Doesn't necessarily need to be press, although that'd be great if it would be. But just lining up 3 yards off the line of scrimmage opposed to 7 or 10. And the reason that is massive is because it dramatically reduces the quick, out-of-the-hand passes that teams are doing against the Steelers. The Steelers are dealing with one of the quickest releases in the NFL against, meaning that they're not giving a chance to get them sacks because they're scared to death of Cam, Watt, and Highsmith, obviously. If we give them the press look or the closer look where it goes, yeah, try to throw your quick wide receiver screen. We'll see how many interceptions Peterson has this year. Because he almost led the league in it last year. So go for it. And then you also compound it with Minka's over the top, so only one of you are getting through, if that, and we're not going to let it happen. I say this to say, if you look at the five-man front that we just outlined here, Highsmith, Cam, Benton, Liao, TJ, that takes a hell of a lot more than five guys to block. We can make people play and force them as a defense to play 1990s football against us. Only 2 or 3 receivers in the route. Because if you don't, your quarterback gets destroyed. There are so many plays when we watch Highsmith's highlight film that he showed Watt-like tendencies. Unblockable off the edge and blowing people up. There also were 5 other times last year where Highsmith had a quarterback slip out of him. Granted, 3 were against the Jets, but it happened. Highsmith is a magnet to the ball, and he started to show the propensity of the strip sack last year. That guy will never be single blocked again. We already know they don't do it to Watt. So now, doubling the edges mean you have 7 blockers. That's 3 men in coverage and single coverage on Cam, Liao, and Benton. And if you can guarantee me that I have a guard on Liao and Cam every play, together, those 2 will have 25 sacks. You give me 25 sacks from my interior D-line, I'm very confident the 2 outside guys are giving me at least 10. We're talking 45 sacks before we even still conservative world. This team has the capability of destroying people. And that's just the traditional pass rushers. You say you go into a traditional nickel or dime look, so Benton's off the field. Still gives you the option of doing the screamer, of having a safety come down. Neal was amazing at that, by the way. Having one of our linebackers that we just acquired, which are also good at that. There is great benefit in returning to sending 5 men per play. And it is all based upon the strength of Highsmith and Watt. Because again, if there is panic and confusion, teams fail. We led the league in interceptions last year without TJ. Imagine what we're going to do with an entire year of pass rush. And going back to yesterday's episode of yards per play, if you give a team a negative play, a sack translation, their yards per play falls to the floor. And the team that was the best at that last year got themselves to the Super Bowl. And there is no reason defensively we cannot be the same as the Philadelphia Eagles were last year. We play a weak schedule just like the Eagles did. We have a decade, just a complete deck of great pass rushers. And we now have corners on the outside that will rip the ball out of the year as proven by last year. This defense is capable, in the way it's constructed this year, not last year, but the way it's constructed this year, assuming Highsmith and Watt play the whole year, this defense can be as good as the Eagles were last year. This defense can break Burrow. And this defense can shut down Kelsey. We can make the Super Bowl with this defense. That's not an exaggeration. That is not hyperbole. This defense is capable of being elite, being the best in the NFL in all phases, and it all starts with that pass rush. Steelers is going to be a great year. We'll be able to know immediately if they step up. I think they will. And this is going to be great. So here we go, Steelers. Here we go.